In this self-knit bobbly de baba dee ba doo doo. Alright, we're going to talk about self-defense and fitness. This is the Hypno-Athletics podcast. Hypno-Athletics, exercising your mind. I'm Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander. And, fitness is really it's really an important part of self-defense. And, I'm here looking at some video of me hitting the heavy bag, and you'll see it as the video if you're looking at this on YouTube. If you're listening to it on any one of the podcast only, audio only podcast sites, then I'll put a link to the YouTube channel if you want to watch me getting my butt kicked by this heavy bag. It's interesting that I look at my self-training and I always see that I have to improve a lot of things. So many things that I think that I'm doing or that I go in with a plan to do. And, when I get tired, then a lot of those things start to become lacking. One of the things I noticed a lot by watching fights, by watching boxing and MMA in particular, those are the two most the combat sports that I watch, are that the athletes, when they get tired, a lot of the techniques start to fade away. And it's the same with me. And when I used to wrestle and I used to do some amateur MMA stuff, I rarely went past the first period or the first couple of rounds, and so the fatigue didn't play much of a factor in those competitions for me. So fortunately I had I was very physically dominant to the point that I could get away with a lack of technique by just bullying my opponent, just by bombarding them with a lot of physical aggression. And a couple people schooled me when things did get into later rounds and they had better technique and they conserved their energy. But what I do have to say about that is that the fitness conditioning is important, and being well-rounded with strength and conditioning. And so just a couple things I want to mention about that, fitness and self-defense, are that a couple of people that I've known for many, many years, all my life, I've recently exercised with, did some workouts with, outdoors, biking, in the gym. And some things that I do for a warm-up, people are struggling with, like breathing heavy and needing a break, after just a few short minutes, like 5 minutes of a warm-up, where only recently I've started doing this. I've started warming up 10 minutes before my heavy bag workouts, mostly just as a practice, because I recently recertified as a personal fitness trainer and a group exercise instructor, and so I want to also get it ingrained in myself, a practice that I'm going to be sharing with my clients, because it's important for a lot of people to warm up before exercise, especially if they are deconditioned, meaning mostly that they have like muscular imbalances, or that they have an adaptation to being sedentary, so they may not have a lot of strength or cardio or balance. And so but I've been doing those warm-ups, and I've noticed that something that I would do as a warm-up would totally destroy some people. And sometimes it's hard to have that perspective when, when you're good at something and when you've been doing it for a while, that even when you are not in a really good condition yourself, that you're being out of shape or you're not being fit is even still way above other people's. And sometimes I don't take that in consideration when I realize that I really should. It's very important, especially when working with clients. But, I haven't done it for 4 years since I was living in China. And it's interesting, though, that so first of all, conditioning is a very important aspect in self-defense, and not only in combat or combat sports. If you can't physically perform some of the movements and techniques, which are really very basic when it comes down to self-defense, but if you're not physically fit enough to use the techniques and you get tired really quickly, it's going to be a problem for you, and you're going to get yourself in some really dangerous situations where you can get hurt really badly. But that's number one. One really important point here is that as far as self-defense goes, one of the most important things for people to do is to get into the gym and to start working out, and start working out sensibly, starting with things like stabilization, making sure that you test things like your balance and test muscular imbalances. Sometimes we might be more tight on the left side than on our right, and to start there with that foundation, and then start looking at things like strength, and then endurance and conditioning and flexibility. But flexibility is really important. It goes along with stabilization and muscular imbalances to correct those things. But there's no thing that's really necessarily more important than the other, but that you start from a point of stabilization first. Just making sure you have the right kind of balance and you're able to stabilize yourself to be able to start moving on to the next types of movements, which consist of strength and endurance. So you start with stabilization, flexibility, then you can move on to things like basic endurance or and then strength training. But everyone's different. You're going to start from a different place. Everyone has different needs. So, but overall, if people are interested in self-defense, it's really so important to start with conditioning, and really checking out your conditioning also has a lot to do with finding out and knowing yourself and knowing where you are, so that you know what tools you can and cannot use, or what tools you should or should not use. Because again, it could be obvious to some people, but it's, everyone's different. We all have different tools, and we have to take what works for us. And if it's something's not working for us, we can definitely work on improving it, but not relying on it in a self-defense situation. And and not also doing our best not to compare ourselves to others, unless comparison, is easy. People do it all the time. And it really comes down to being important when, you're in competition. If you're going to do combat sports, if you're going to get in the ring, it's important to take note of things like that. But most people aren't really going into combat sports to compete. A lot of people will do a lot better for themselves when they focus on, fitness, and then thinking about how you can become more confident by learning self-defense, and being careful not to be confident in a false way by thinking that you're going to learn a kata or some form and then you can defend yourself. It comes down to a lot of things more simple than that. Some of the combat sports that lend themselves mostly to self-defense, I think in the best way, are boxing, Muy Thai or Thai kickboxing, and wrestling, submission wrestling, and things like jiu-jitsu, because boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, like collegiate and even the high school freestyle wrestling, those sports, you're put into the fire. You're not training to just do some forms or show off. You're training to compete against other people who are going to resist. So that's where those things come to be important to a lot of people. So, just wrapping this up, just making a little note. It's really important to focus on, getting physically fit. And that's going to mean different things to different people, but you have to learn how to be the best version of yourself physically as a starting point, and starting to learn those things about your body, like how stable you are in different positions, what your different flexibility, restrictions and strengths are, and then moving forward from there. And, you'll learn a lot about yourself by, starting from the beginning and figuring out what your strengths and weaknesses are. And, it doesn't have to be in the gym. There are many different ways that you can learn how to be physically fit through different online platforms and whatnot. But you can figure it out, and, just don't be afraid to ask any questions and learn more about yourself. All right, this is Hakeem Alexander, Hypno Athletics, exercising your mind, and I'll catch you on the next wave. Stay well. Hey, what song am I going to play on the outro here? Let's see. I'll play some Decoherence. All right, y'all. Take care.